Welcome to TRT World's flagship arts and culture program Showcase, coming to you from our headquarters in Istanbul. On today's show, we'll speak to a Rumi expert about the forgotten messages the mystical poet left behind. But first, long lost, found, and lost again? We'll look into the origins of the world's most expensive painting and ask, where is the Salvator Mundi now?
We've been involved in cases where people perpetrating fraud, creating fakes, have gone to prison, and so the consequences are extremely real for those people.
Watching The Detectives, we'll meet a team of people tasked with solving the art world's greatest mysteries. Buying a piece of art can be a high-stakes gamble. As sales increase, prices increase, and inevitably, so do the number of forgeries. But how do you know that the piece you've set your heart on is genuine? Enter the art detectives. With backgrounds in science, technology, and history, they're able to tell a Da Vinci from a dud. Showcase's Miranda Addy went to visit one of London's best teams to find out if they can spot a fraud.
There's data to analyse, colour fragments to check, and imaging of different layers of paint to scan. All these tools are part of an average day at Art Analytics and Research. Founded in 2009, it's one of a handful of companies in London that investigate the origin of a piece of art, its value, and its authenticity. I'm spending a few hours with the London office's principal investigator, Jalene Nadolny. Jalene, a huge part of what you do here is analysing paintings like this and telling the owners about the provenance. Now, you've brought two examples to show us here. Can you tell us a little bit about the specifics of each piece of work?
Alfred Wallace painted seascapes, towns and boats and things he would have seen, and he used remnants of boat paint. A lot of the fakes we find of his are made in normal artist materials. He's very easy to fake because he was a self-taught artist. He's not highly blended, not highly sophisticated, and forgers think, oh, I can do this. And the other one that we have here was bought by another client, this time at an auction house in Europe, as the work of an important British modernist, Morgan Russell. The forger's really taken a lot of effort to make it look old. They've rubbed dirt into the surface to make it age and get this sort of brownish effect. It's again made of materials that the artist wouldn't have access to.
Being a detective in the art world is big business. Worldwide art sales hit $63.7 billion in 2017, according to Art Basel's Global Art Report. That was a 12% increase over the previous year. Selling a fake has huge repercussions for auction houses and private collectors alike.
If you're out there forging paintings, you're committing crimes. And so we've been involved in cases where people perpetrating fraud, creating fakes, have gone to prison, and so the consequences are extremely real for those people. On the other side of it, we have people come to us who believe they've discovered a lost masterpiece, and if we're able to help them, it's not just finding something of value. It's being able to help them understand what it is they have and the story of this object, previously lost to culture and art history.
The team is comprised of historians, physicists, art experts, and forensic scientists. And it's this combination of specialities and perspectives that makes the company so unique. While the scientists and technicians analyse the data, historians and art experts take into account wider context.
So we've got lots and lots of art books, and all our chemistry books and our pigment books, like the Pigment Compendium, which our founder worked on with a group of specialist colleagues, which allows us to have really an unparalleled knowledge of pigments.
They analyse tiny samples from paintings via microscopes and high-tech scanners.
Here we have a portrait by Rembrandt that was auctioned by Christie's here in London. And what we did was do a series of technical imaging to look at how the painting was put together, and in this case, what it was painted over. The technical imaging we're using uses rays that go through the surface, bounce off the ground of the painting, and show what's in between the ground of the support and what you see with the naked eye. So here we're starting to get some forms coming out. We know something's going on there. And if we look at it with X-ray, we can actually see there's a portrait of an old man here.
Art investigation is becoming an increasingly vital part of the industry. That's because failing to take a piece's origin or attribution seriously could have a huge impact on our understanding of both an artist's technique and their development. Not to mention the financial ramifications. With a guaranteed refund for fake works, it's no wonder Sotheby's recently launched its own investigation unit in New York and plans to expand to London. The stakes may be increasingly high, but the art detectives have got it covered. Miranda Atty, TRT World, London.
Our next story might need some of those art detectives you just saw on the case. Last November, Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, or Savior of the World, was bought by the Louvre Abu Dhabi for $450 million, becoming the most expensive painting ever sold. It had been missing for 300 years until it was discovered at an auction house in the United States in 2005. But exactly what happened to the Salvator Mundi before it resurfaced is still a mystery and raises serious questions about both its provenance and authenticity. And even more questions were raised last month after the Louvre Abu Dhabi said it was postponing the painting's unveiling without saying why. Experts are worried that the painting could be damaged after Christie's removed its protective glass just before the auction. Once described as the greatest discovery of the 21st century, the mystery surrounding Salvator Mundi continues to thicken, not to mention the fact that the painting hasn't been seen since it was sold. Let's cross over to Los Angeles now to speak with the Director of Modern and Contemporary Art at Heritage Auctions, Leon Benrimoni. Thank you so much for joining us today, Leon. Now, where is the Salvator Mundi exactly?
That's the $450 million question. We don't know. That the work hasn't been seen since it was purchased. And I think many people in the art world who have some kind of a connection or involvement with the work are very concerned about its whereabouts.
Now, there are a lot of speculations around why the painting hasn't been shown yet, or, they're saying, some people are saying that it could be damaged, or other people are saying it could be a fake. What's your take on that?
Well, there's definitely a possibility for damage. Christie's removed the protective glass that was surrounding the work, but more importantly, served as almost like a vacuum barrier to make sure that the work doesn't have any kind of foreign objects or particles. Given its age and given how many times it's been restored, even being subjected to just normal air quality could create an issue for the work. Aside from that, I believe that people are concerned that there could be additional scientific evidence being looked at and having different experts evaluate its authenticity in that respect, and also to look at the various different restorations it's had over the years.
So tell me exactly how fragile this painting is.
It's incredibly fragile. Most works that were made in that time period are in museums. They've been looked after by historians and conservationists for hundreds of years, and so this is it's an incredibly rare opportunity to see a work that hasn't had that kind of care and treatment over the years, and has only recently been kind of reestablished as important, and as a result is getting a whole new set of attention that it hasn't had earlier.
Mm-hmm. Now, moving on to another speculation about the Salvator Mundi, there are art historians that are saying that it wasn't painted by Leonardo da Vinci. It was actually painted by his assistant. Only around 5 to 20% of it maybe was painted by da Vinci himself. What do you think about all the speculation surrounding this painting as to who painted it?
I think the bottom line is we'll never know. No one ever will. I think there will be differing opinions, as there always are, but I think with a work of this age, it's very difficult to be able to determine with great certainty who painted the majority of the work. I think that the consensus is that regardless of who kind of originated the work has been restored so frequently over the past couple hundred years that as a result, if it's Leonardo or his assistant or his studio assistant, in either scenario, it has now kind of taken on becoming a composition from multiple different artists who've restored it over the years.
So given that Christie's did take off the glass that was protecting the Salvator Mundi, do you think that they're getting a lot of backlash for the possibility of it being damaged?
I don't think so. The question is what happened immediately after the work was sold, if the glass was immediately restored in the proper manner. I think Christie's did a very good job marketing the work, and they did what they needed to do to market the work properly, and part of that was removing the glass. And I think they did that in a very effective manner for people who went to the preview in New York or the preview in Hong Kong. The way that they had set up the viewing had very few people looking at the work at any given moment. I think they did that as best as they could by giving the public access to the work, but by the same token, maintaining the best possible integrity of the work while still allowing it to be viewed in the proper manner.
So what's your personal take on the controversy that's surrounding this whole situation of the painting being not shown yet and so on?
Well, I think the public is going to start to demand to ask questions. Right now, I think it's a group of people who are closely related to the work, either having had studied the work from an art historical perspective or having worked on it from a conservation restorative perspective. But fairly soon, the public at large is going to wonder where this work is, and is going to demand to see it. The fact that it was sold to a museum was such kind of a welcomed scenario for the art world, rather than thinking that it might have been bought by a private collector and may not be seen again. But it only serves that purpose if it's being viewed by the public. So if we're unable to see it soon, I am quite sure that the public at large is going to start to ask questions.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see as to how this case unfolds. Leon, thank you so much for joining us on Showcase today and sharing that insight.
Thank you for having me.
Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, or simply Rumi, is the most popular and, some say, the most misinterpreted poet in the world. Although deeply rooted in the prophetic tradition of Islam, many read his words without taking into account the Sufi or the Islamic references in his work. I am the slave of the Quran while I still have life. I am dust on the path of Muhammad, the chosen one. If anyone interprets my words in any other way, I deplore that person, I deplore his words. Those are the very words of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. Author and scholar Shems Friedlander solidly places Rumi within the heart of Islam. In his book, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi's Forgotten Message, Friedlander also calls for a study of the true essence of Rumi as a Sufi saint and founder of a Sufi path. Friedlander says the cure for our spiritual amnesia lies in integrating Rumi's lessons into our everyday lives, as each verse of the Mesnavi is a teaching and a love letter. Rumi and Sufism scholar and author Shems Friedlander joins us now in our studio. Thank you so much for being with us today, Shems. Now, start off by telling me about your latest book and what Rumi's Forgotten Message is.
Well, people have forgotten that all of Rumi's thoughts, the roots of all of Rumi's thoughts is the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. And they look at Rumi as a poet. He was not only a poet, we should be looking at Rumi not as a poet, but as a lover of Allah. If we look at Rumi as Mevlana Jalaluddin, as a lover of Allah, then we can see the essence of everything that comes out of him and why he expresses things the way he does.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of brings me to how he's perceived in the West as well, because some people mix his teachings as between the physical love and the metaphysical love. Tell me a bit about that and that confusion that there is in the West of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi.
Mevlana Jalaluddin didn't talk about physical love. He talked about metaphysical love, the love of Allah, the love of the Prophet Muhammad. And everything centered around that. And he gave us, as a guide, he gave us a way of living. He gave us what we call a book, but I don't call it a book. I don't call the Mesnevi a book. I call the Mesnevi a sheikh, because Mevlana left himself in those writings. Although he never wrote anything himself except the first 18 lines of the Mesnevi, everything was dictated in Persian, and he spoke immensely for many, many years, the last 25 years of his life. And it was a guidance to us. So we need to glean from what he said to overcome our spiritual amnesia, which we're in the age of. Mm-hmm. And the way we do that is by applying Mevlana's teachings in our everyday life.
Speaking about applying his teachings in our everyday life, how do we do that?
Well, we have to first study Mevlana and how he spoke and what he did. He tells a story in the Mesnevi about Shaiban. Shaiban was a shepherd. And this shepherd, every Friday before he went to Jummah prayer, would draw a circle around his sheep in the earth, right? In order to protect the sheep and from the ravaging wolves. And after that circle was drawn with a Bismillah, he could go off and no wolf would dare enter that circle and no sheep would ever come out of the circle. They were protected. Now, Allah, how do we apply that now into our life?
Exactly.
Allah has given us a circle of remembrance, the zikr Allah. And in this circle of remembrance, Allah has given us a protection from the negativity of the world and the difficulties and dangers that we find ourselves in front of in the world.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, tell me about, within your book, there are many QR codes that readers can come across. Tell me what these QR codes represent and what they're meant for.
Okay, I'm sort of an electronic dinosaur in a way with the internet and social. I don't do social media or anything like that. But my son Omer, we were talking one day, and I said, look, what I want to do is make this book really available to this generation. They don't read very much, and I want to find some way to make it interactive. So let's talk about how to do that. And we came up with this idea of QR codes. Where you can just scan the QR code if it's on the page, and you then get to see photographs of various things that apply to information on the page, or even videos.
Wow.
So by making it interactive this way, I feel possibly we've attracted a younger audience, people who can now just scan, let's say, a paragraph that talks about the Sema, and then actually see photographs of the Sema and in various forms, 3, 4, 5 photographs. Or there's one scan near the Kaaba and showing people sitting around the Kaaba and making tawaf. And if you scan that in the palm of your hand, you then see the tawaf in Mecca, which relates to the book.
Wow.
So
that's a really good technique that you guys have done there, kind of mixing the digital with the literature to speak
no one's
to
done
the
it
younger
before
generation.
in this way.
I haven't seen it before.
No.
I have to say, I have not seen that
No.
technique used before. Now, Shems, can you, if you can, give me a quote from Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi? It could be your favorite quote and the message that's behind that specific quote.
Okay, well, I don't think quotes are the best way to look at Mevlana. I think Mevlana told stories, he told the essence of teaching. People have made quotes, of course, but Mevlana himself told stories, and in those stories there was a relationship of how to live. For example, there's a story of the grammarian and the boatman. And a grammarian wanted to go across the Bosphorus. And he got on one of those small boats where it just rowed by one person. And he was very haughty and very arrogant. And halfway across the Bosphorus, he said to the boatman, this poor man who was just rowing him, "Tell me, my good sir, do you know anything about grammar?" And the boatman looked at him and said, "What? No." And he says, "Ah, well, half of your life has been wasted." And the boatman felt terrible, but he didn't say anything, and he kept rowing and rowing. And then a storm kind of came up, and the boat was having some problems in the water. And the boatman said to the grammarian, "Tell me, sir, do you know how to swim?" And he said, "Actually, I don't know how to swim." He says, "Ah, well, your whole life has been wasted because we're about to capsize in this whirlpool." So here's a story that Mevlana tells, right? And the essence of that story is that if you're arrogant, your arrogance will turn into something else and never be able to accommodate you in a good way. So that arrogance then would cause this person to actually lose his life and someone else to lose friends or lose other things. And so Mevlana always had something specific behind what he
important
said.
lessons that he's actually teaching.
Absolutely.
We are approaching December, which means that Sheb-i Aruz is approaching as well. And there are going to be ceremonies taking place all across Konya. What can we expect this year? And if I'm not mistaken, you're going to be taking place within those ceremonies as well this year.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about what to expect
Well,
during Sheb-i Aruz.
First, we can expect upwards of 50,000 people coming to the week of Sheb-i Aruz. Now, Sheb-i Aruz itself it means the wedding night of Mevlana. It represents the night that he passed from this world and went to his beloved, Allah. And even Mevlana said, "Don't look for me in the grave, look for me in the hearts of learned men." So in Konya, this Sheb-i Aruz, we're going to see, they're setting up a big tent. It started last year in the Maidan, where every day there's 2 or 3 people that are asked to give a talk, and there's music in the tent, and it's for the whole week. And there are many people will be giving talks there. We'll talk about sohbets, like the thing I want, just that I mentioned the word sohbet, I think what's very important to note here regarding Mevlana and Shems is that Shems was not the master of Mevlana. Shems was not the sheikh of Mevlana. Mevlana was already a sheikh when he met Shems. He was a Kubrawiya sheikh initiated by his father, who was known as the Sultan of Scholars, Bahauddin Velid, at that time. And it's important to note that because people have misunderstood that and think that Shems was the master and the sheikh of Mevlana. But they were sohbet sheikhs. They sat together and spoke of spiritual matters in the loftiest, the highest manner. And this is what's important to know, that this kind of spiritual conversation is very much part of what happens in Konya, what will happen. Of course, there'll be semas. There's a sema every night leading up to the 17th, which is the Sheb-i Aruz night, and there'll be a big sema on that night.
Speaking of semas, these photos were actually taken by you?
They were taken by me, and I just saw them here for the first time in a long time. They were done in the 1970s. I think it was 1973 when I photographed this in Konya. So it goes on. And don't forget,
memories.
we have one thing that's very important I'd like to sort of leave you with is that we are praying more now to Apple than to Allah. And I'm really an advocate of trying to change that. And one thing I'll just leave you all with is that Atesh Bas Veli was loved by Mevlana. He was his personal cook. And the secret of Atesh Bas Veli's cooking, which every one of us can apply in our own lives, is that when he cooked a pot of food, whatever it was, bulgur or meat or soup or rice, whatever he was cooking, with a wooden spatula and spoon, he wrote the name of Allah on the food.
We should take that as an example and
Yes.
implement it more into our daily lives.
And a light will come to us and those that eat if we apply that.
Exactly. Shems, thank you so much for joining us today on Showcase and sharing your wise words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we wrap up another edition of Showcase. Remember to visit our YouTube channel for more of our stories about the international art scene. From me, Efnan Han, and the rest of the Showcase team, thanks for watching and see you next time.